At 6 a.m., this HOA president is blocking my driveway, screaming, "We'll seize your property by force." The stench of her desperation mixed with cheap perfume made the morning air toxic. But what she didn't know, what made me grin while she threatened me, was the smoking gun document I'd found the night before. For 18 months, she'd tortured me with fake government citations, hired fraudulent surveyors, and filed false reports with federal agencies. All because I dared to buy a house 50 feet outside her jurisdiction. I'm Dalton, and I thought escaping the HOA meant freedom. Instead, I stumbled into something that would expose corruption affecting 67 innocent families who had no idea what was coming for them. What would you do if a power-drunk neighbor declared war on your property rights? Where are you watching from? Comment below. I guarantee some of you are living this nightmare right now, because this Karen picked the wrong electrician to mess with. My name's Dalton Martinez, 45, electrician and small contractor for 20 years. After my divorce, I was done with apartment hell, paper-thin walls, screaming babies at 3 a.m., and those industrial AC units humming like dental drills 24/7. I wanted space, peace, the right to park my work truck without some property manager having a meltdown. When I found this 1940s farmhouse on Meadowlark Road, 2.3 acres for $185K, I knew I'd hit the jackpot. Solid bones, needed work, and the smell of honeysuckle mixed with old wood made it feel like home instantly. Best part? County maps showed I was 50 feet outside the Willowbrook Estates HOA boundary. I'd done my homework, called the county twice, verified everything. Complete freedom. Yeah, right. Moving day, September heat making me sweat through my shirt, when this white Lexus glides into my driveway. Out steps suburban royalty. Blonde bob so perfect it defied physics. Outfit worth more than my truck payment, carrying a wicker basket like Martha Stewart's evil twin. Brenda Kowalski, HOA president. Shark smile, predator eyes, welcome basket for our new neighbor. The basket had fancy soaps and a manila envelope thick as a phone book, HOA covenants, bylaws, and a note explaining how sweet old Mrs. Mila had informally agreed to follow their rules for neighborhood harmony. Their demands? Remove my planned vegetable garden, aesthetically inconsistent. Paint the house beige from their approved palette. Hide my work truck in the garage during visible hours. Thanks, but I'm not in your HOA, I said, pointing to the actual property line. 50 feet that way. Her smile twitched. Previous arrangements still apply. Community standards benefit property values. I understand property law. That's when things got interesting. The friendly mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Mr. Martinez, there are always creative solutions for compliance issues. Ask Mrs. Mila's family about our persistence. The way she said creative solutions felt like a threat wrapped in suburban politeness. But it was that last part about Mrs. Mila's family that made my electrician instincts start buzzing. Something was off. After she left, I called the county. Again, property survey confirmed I was outside their jurisdiction, period. But that night, I decided to do something that would save my sanity later. I called Mrs. Mila's daughter Margaret in Portland. "Oh God, you bought Mom's house?" Margaret's voice went tight. "Did that Kowalski woman show up yet?" Turns out Brenda had made Mrs. Mila's final years miserable. Fake violation notices, constant harassment, inspections that were really intimidation visits. Margaret had kept every piece of documentation, hoping to file complaints after her mother passed. "She has this thing about expanding the HOA," Margaret warned. "Mom always said Brenda needed more houses to solve some financial problem." Financial problem? That was the first hint something bigger was lurking beneath Brenda's suburban tyranny. I hung up and immediately ordered security cameras on Amazon. If this woman had tortured an elderly lady, she'd definitely escalate with me. Sure enough, every morning brought the sound I'd grown to hate. Expensive tires crunching on gravel as Brenda drove slowly past my house. She'd stop, photograph everything, make notes like she was building a legal case. The funny thing, I actually felt sorry for my new neighbors. Living under this woman's rule must be like having a prison warden with a real estate license and too much time on her hands. But here's what I didn't know yet. Brenda wasn't just some control freak with boundary issues. She was desperate. And desperate people with a little authority are the most dangerous kind. Because while I was installing cameras and researching property law, she was already planning her next move. And it was going to be a lot more creative than fake welcome baskets. The war for Meadowlark Road was about to begin. 2 weeks after moving in, I woke up to find a bright yellow notice taped to my front door. The paper felt official, thick, watermarked with fancy letterhead that screamed government authority. Violation notice. Immediate compliance required. According to this bureaucratic masterpiece, I was guilty of unauthorized exterior modifications because I'd fixed 3 shutters that were literally hanging by 1 nail each. Apparently, replacing broken hardware without HOA approval was a $150 per day violation, starting immediately. The next morning brought another yellow beauty. Commercial vehicle violation. My work truck in my own driveway was somehow illegal. Day 3. Landscaping non-compliance because I hadn't mowed in exactly 4 days. The smell of fresh-cut grass from my neighbor's yard made the accusation even more ridiculous. All signed by Willowbrook Code Enforcement Division, with an official seal that looked legitimate enough to fool most people. Here's the thing about being an electrician for 20 years. You develop an eye for when the wiring doesn't match the blueprint. Something about these notices felt wrong. The language was too formal, the violations too petty, the timing too convenient. During my lunch break, I called the city's actual code enforcement office. "Hey, I'm getting violation notices from you guys. Just want to verify the inspector's name and badge number." Long pause. Papers shuffling. "Sir, we haven't issued any citations on Meadowlark Road this month. What's the citation number?" That's when my electrician's intuition proved right. The letterhead was fake, the seal was clip art, and the Willowbrook Code Enforcement Division existed only in Brenda's imagination. I remembered reading somewhere that impersonating government authority is actually a serious crime, up to a year in jail in most states. Brenda was playing a dangerous game, but she wasn't finished with her performance art. That afternoon, a white sedan pulled up. Out stepped Brenda with reinforcements, a woman in a Navy business suit who introduced herself as Patricia Vance, HOA Compliance Coordinator. Patricia spoke like she was addressing the UN Security Council instead of complaining about vegetation height. "Mr. Martinez, we've identified several concerning irregularities in your property maintenance standards." "Such as?" Patricia pulled out an actual measuring tape. "The hedge trimming height variance exceeds community standards by approximately 3 inches. Additionally, your mailbox positioning creates visual inconsistency with neighborhood aesthetics." I watched this woman literally measure my hedge while photographing angles like she was documenting a crime scene. The whole scene was so absurd I nearly burst out laughing. These people were treating lawn care like nuclear disarmament negotiations. "Ladies, I'm not in your HOA. Those citations are fake. Keep this up and I'm calling actual police." Brenda's friendly mask evaporated completely. "Property values here depend on community cooperation, Mr. Martinez. It would be unfortunate if your business reputation suffered due to unprofessional conduct allegations." There was the real threat. She was going after my livelihood. That evening, I started what would become my obsession. Documentation. Every fake citation got photographed, filed, and cross-referenced. Every conversation got recorded on my phone. Every drive-by surveillance session got time-stamped. My kitchen table transformed into mission control for Operation Expose Brenda. I also reached out to Tom Hendricks, my neighbor down the street. Over beers on his back porch, Tom revealed Brenda's greatest hits from last year. Fake surveys claiming his fence violated property lines, harassment about his basketball hoop, threats to report his home business for tax evasion. "She's gotten worse since they built that community center," Tom said, the evening crickets providing soundtrack to our conspiracy theory session. Like she's desperate to prove her authority or something. The following week brought Brenda's magnum opus, a demand for a professional property survey, because county maps were potentially outdated. The surveyor, her brother-in-law Rick, who arrived with equipment that looked like it escaped from a middle school science fair. Rick spent 20 minutes waving around some device, possibly a level, maybe a fancy protractor, then announced my property line was 15 feet closer to the road. My garden shed was now allegedly on HOA territory. "That'll be $800 for the survey," Rick declared. "Cash or check preferred." "What's your state license number, Rick?" "My what now?" "Professional surveyors need state licenses. Should be displayed on your equipment and paperwork." Rick's face went white. He packed up faster than a street magician avoiding cops, muttering something about checking calibration as he fled. By month's end, my evidence collection resembled a prosecutor's wet dream: fake citations, bogus surveys, screenshots of Brenda's social media rumors about her problematic neighbor. But here's what made me smile during those long documentation sessions. Every piece of harassment was actually building my case. Brenda thought she was intimidating me into submission. Instead, she was handing me the rope for her own legal hanging. The citation blitz was her opening gambit. It was also her first catastrophic mistake. After Rick's embarrassing retreat, I figured Brenda might reconsider her strategy. Wrong again. The woman had the persistence of a telemarketer and twice the creativity. A week later, Rick returned with backup, a full crew and equipment that actually looked professional. The transformation was stunning. Gone was the confused guy with a glorified protractor. This Rick wore a hard hat, carried clipboards, and barked orders at two assistants like he was overseeing the Panama Canal construction. They'd rented legitimate surveying gear, transit levels, measuring chains, GPS units that beeped importantly. Rick threw around terms like geodetic coordinates and bearing calculations, with the confidence of someone who'd spent serious time on YouTube University. The performance was Academy Award material. 3 hours of measuring everything twice, taking notes on official forms, planting orange flags like they were claiming territory for Spain. The morning air filled with the sound of equipment beeping, and Rick shouting measurements that probably meant nothing. According to his corrected findings, the county had been catastrophically wrong for decades. My property line allegedly ran 15 feet into what I'd thought was my land. Not only was my garden shed supposedly on HOA territory, but my driveway was now a shared easement, requiring written permission for any modifications. Professional survey complete, Rick announced, handing me a folder thicker than a phone book. County maps were based on outdated reference points from the Carter administration. This corrects historical surveying errors. The documentation was impressively fraudulent. Charts, elevation data, enough technical jargon to confuse a MIT graduate. Rick had clearly invested significant effort into this particular fiction. Brenda materialized at my door the next morning like a bad rash. Now that property boundaries are properly established, we need compliance timelines. 30 days to relocate that shed, plus easement agreements for driveway usage. And if I refuse? Property encroachment carries serious legal consequences. We'd hate involving attorneys, but rights must be protected. Her smile could have frozen lava. Here's where 20 years of electrical work saved my sanity. When you rewire old houses, you learn that previous work is often complete garbage. So instead of panicking, I started fact-checking like a paranoid journalist. I called 3 real surveyors for quotes, just to understand their process. Every conversation revealed glaring problems with Rick's methodology. Legitimate surveyors spend days researching historical records, use GPS equipment calibrated to satellite networks, and carry insurance for million-dollar mistakes because boundary disputes can literally destroy lives. Rick's survey had taken 3 hours and relied on measuring distances from random trees. No GPS calibration, no historical research, no insurance documentation anywhere. The smoking gun came from the state licensing board. Rick's surveying license had been suspended 2 years ago for, wait for it, falsifying boundary reports in a divorce proceeding. The man was a repeat offender. Time for nuclear retaliation. I hired Jennifer Walsh, a surveyor with credentials longer than my grocery list and equipment that made NASA jealous. The $1,200 fee made my credit card weep, but watching Jennifer's team arrive was pure satisfaction. Their GPS units alone cost more than Rick's entire rental budget. Jennifer's crew worked with the methodical precision of Swiss watchmakers. 2 full days of measurements, cross-referenced with county records dating back to when Eisenhower was president. Their laser levels were so accurate they could probably measure the Earth's rotation. The results were beautiful vindication. My boundaries matched county records exactly. Rick's survey contained more errors than a first-year math student's homework. But Jennifer discovered something even sweeter. The HOA's fancy entrance sign sat partially on county easement without permits. This previous survey contains 12 fundamental errors, Jennifer explained, comparing documents with the clinical precision of a coroner. Whoever did this was either completely incompetent or deliberately falsifying results. When Brenda saw Jennifer's crew, she stormed over like an angry hen defending her nest. The confrontation was magnificent. "What's happening here?" Brenda demanded. "Professional boundary verification," Jennifer replied with the calm authority of someone who actually knew what they were doing. "We already surveyed this property." Jennifer glanced at Rick's paperwork. I swear she almost laughed. "Ma'am, this document wouldn't be admissible in traffic court, let alone property litigation." Brenda's face cycled through colors I didn't know human skin could achieve before she retreated to plot her next assault. That evening, Tom brought beer and intelligence. "Emergency HOA meeting tomorrow night. You're officially an external threat to community stability now." The irony was delicious enough to bottle and sell. Brenda had committed survey fraud to steal my land, but her own entrance sign was illegally squatting on public property. I spent the night organizing evidence that now included professional documentation of her fraud. Brenda was building my legal case one fake document at a time, but her next escalation would make survey fraud look like jaywalking. She was about to weaponize the utility companies themselves. 3 days after Jennifer exposed Rick's survey scam, Brenda discovered my property shared a utility easement with her precious HOA community. What should have been boring infrastructure became her new weapon of mass harassment. The easement ran along our shared property line, a 20-foot strip where electric, water, and gas lines served both my house and the HOA's common areas. It had existed peacefully since the Kennedy administration without causing anyone grief. Until Brenda decided my garden irrigation was interfering with critical utility access. Tuesday morning, I woke to find 3 utility trucks parked on my lawn, not in my driveway, literally on my grass, leaving tire tracks like a monster truck rally had invaded suburbia. Workers in hard hats excavated around my water lines while a supervisor barked orders about emergency access protocols. "What's the emergency?" I asked the supervisor, a weathered guy named Mike, who looked like he'd rather be fishing. "Report about unauthorized modifications affecting utility infrastructure," Mike said, consulting his paperwork. "Someone claimed your irrigation system compromises main waterline access." I watched them spend 3 hours digging around my perfectly legal sprinkler system, installed by a licensed contractor 2 months earlier. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust from their equipment mixed with fresh-turned earth, creating an industrial bouquet that would linger for days. Their conclusion? No interference, no violations, no problems whatsoever. My irrigation was textbook compliant. Who filed the report? Mike showed me the complaint form. Brenda Kowalski, describing my sprinkler system like it was Chernobyl threatening the neighborhood's water supply. But Brenda's utility theater was just getting started. The following week brought the great gas leak hoax of Meadowlark Road. At 6 a.m., sirens jolted me awake. Through my bedroom window, I watched fire trucks, gas company vehicles, and police cars descend like D-Day was starting in suburbia. Someone had reported a potential gas leak near our property line. Within minutes, they'd evacuated 3 houses and deployed a full hazmat crew with detection equipment that belonged in a sci-fi movie. Standing on the sidewalk in my bathrobe at dawn, watching hazmat techs wave electronic wands around my yard, I felt like I was starring in the world's most expensive practical joke. My neighbors clustered in confused groups, some clutching coffee cups, others holding confused pets, everyone looking like refugees from a suburban disaster film. The morning air filled with the chemical smell of emergency response vehicles and the steady beeping of gas detection equipment scanning for invisible threats. After 2 hours of intensive searching, the inevitable verdict, no leak detected. 0. Their expensive equipment found nothing more dangerous than my neighbor's overwatered roses. "False alarm," announced Captain Rodriguez from the fire department. "Whoever called this in wasted significant emergency resources." The emergency response bill arrived 3 weeks later, $340 for false alarm fees. I discovered that filing fraudulent emergency reports isn't just expensive. It's actually a felony if there's a pattern of deliberate deception. Brenda was playing increasingly dangerous games. 2 days later, she escalated to environmental warfare. A hydrology specialist appeared. Another clipboard-wielding expert claiming my garden was contaminating the shared aquifer supplying our neighborhood. This specialist, who turned out to be an HVAC guy named Gary, explained with deadpan authority that my vegetable garden was essentially a toxic waste site, threatening everyone's drinking water through excessive organic matter infiltration. The scientific illiteracy was magnificent. Gary suggested my tomato plants were environmental disasters requiring immediate soil remediation costing $2,800, plus ongoing monitoring fees. I'd officially reached my tolerance limit for Brenda's parade of fake professionals. That afternoon, I called Dr. Sarah Kim, an actual hydrologist from the State University. For $400, she spent 3 hours testing soil and water samples around my property. Her findings obliterated Gary's pseudoscience so completely, I almost felt sorry for his ignorance. "Your garden irrigation has 0 environmental impact," Dr. Kim explained, her equipment making soft clicking sounds as it analyzed samples. "Whoever told you otherwise doesn't understand basic hydrology. A residential garden poses less risk than a typical suburban lawn." I requested her assessment in writing, with her PhD credentials prominently displayed for future reference. While documenting Brenda's utility abuse, I discovered a disturbing pattern. She'd been filing false emergency reports for years, targeting anyone who challenged her authority. Mrs. Mila's family confirmed similar harassment. fake gas leaks, imaginary contamination, fraudulent electrical emergencies. But during my research, Beverly Santos suggested something that would change everything. Have you checked the HOA's own permit compliance? What I found in those municipal records would transform this personal harassment campaign into a community-wide financial scandal threatening every family in Willowbrook Estates. The real emergency wasn't my irrigation system, it was what Brenda had been hiding from her own neighbors. Beverly's suggestion to check HOA permit compliance seemed like routine detective work. I figured I'd find minor violations, maybe an unpermitted deck or fence issue, something to give me leverage against future harassment. I had no idea I was about to uncover financial fraud that would explain Brenda's entire campaign. The county clerk's office smells like old paper and decades of bureaucratic neglect. I requested the HOA's building permits for the past 5 years, expecting maybe 20 pages of standard documentation. Instead, they handed me a cardboard box that felt like it weighed 50 pounds. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center, that fancy building where Brenda held her power meetings, had been constructed in 2019 without proper environmental permits. Storm drainage modifications were never approved by the state. The parking lot expansion violated setback requirements. Every major construction project contained violations that should have triggered immediate stop work orders. But here's where my electrician's brain started sparking. The permits that did exist showed construction costs of $340,000. For a community of 67 homes, that meant each family should have been assessed roughly $5,000. I called Tom immediately. How much did you pay for the community center assessment? $1,500. Brenda said they got contractor deals and came in under budget. The math hit me like an electrical shock. If everyone paid $1,500, the HOA had collected only $100,500 for a $340,000 project. Someone had covered a $240,000 difference. That's when I found the smoking gun buried in court records. Lawsuit, City of Willowbrook versus Willowbrook Estates HOA, filed 2021. The HOA had challenged a traffic light installation, claiming it would devastate property values. They'd hired high-powered attorneys, fought the city for 18 months, and lost catastrophically. The final judgment made my hands shake. $847,000 in combined legal fees, court costs, and punitive damages. The HOA was ordered to pay immediately or face asset seizure and dissolution. I sat in my truck outside the courthouse, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at documents that explained everything. The smell of hot asphalt through my open windows mixed with the metallic taste of shock in my mouth. Brenda wasn't harassing me over property standards or community harmony. She was financially desperate, and expanding HOA membership was her only path to survival. My $185,000 property would generate $2,400 annually in dues, force 10 more properties into the HOA, and she'd add $24,000 yearly income. Still nowhere near enough to cover $847,000 in debt, but enough to negotiate payment plans and avoid immediate foreclosure of community assets. Every harassment tactic suddenly made sense. Every fake citation, fraudulent survey, and utility emergency, all motivated by pure financial panic. That evening I called Margaret Mila. Did your mother ever mention HOA financial problems? Mom always said Brenda seemed desperate about expanding boundaries, adding more houses. We thought she was just power hungry. Margaret's voice carried new understanding. But maybe she was trying to save herself. The pieces assembled like a complex wiring diagram, finally making sense. Brenda wasn't just a control freak. She was a woman drowning in debt, using intimidation to force unwilling property owners into her sinking financial ship. But what made my anger burn white hot? None of the 67 families knew about this debt. They were making monthly payments, believing their money-funded community improvements. Instead, their dues were hemorrhaging into legal fee payments for Brenda's catastrophic lawsuit. I researched nonprofit disclosure laws late into the night. HOAs must provide annual financial statements to members. Hiding major debt violates state regulations and potentially constitutes criminal fraud. For the first time since this nightmare began, I held real power. Brenda might control her kingdom through intimidation, but she couldn't hide from banking regulations and state oversight. The question eating at me: use this information to protect myself or expose the truth and save 67 families from continued deception? My conscience wouldn't let me choose self-preservation. This was about justice now. The next morning, I woke up with the focused energy of an electrician who'd finally identified the short circuit. Time to rewire this entire situation. First stop, Marcus Webb's law office downtown. Marcus had the kind of steady confidence that comes from 30 years of making bureaucrats sweat. His office smelled like leather-bound law books and industrial-strength coffee, the aroma of serious legal warfare about to begin. "You've uncovered something spectacular," Marcus said, spreading my evidence across his mahogany desk like a general planning invasion. "Systematic harassment, financial fraud, government impersonation. She's violated so many laws I'll need a calculator to count the felonies." Marcus outlined our battle plan. Build an airtight case while preparing for Brenda's inevitable retaliation. "She's desperate," he warned, adjusting his glasses with the precision of someone who'd seen desperate people destroy themselves. "Desperate people burn everything down rather than surrender." That afternoon, my kitchen table transformed into something that would make FBI investigators jealous. Every fake citation got scanned, filed, and cross-referenced. Security footage compiled into a chronological horror show of Brenda's greatest harassment hits. The printer worked overtime, churning out evidence packets with mechanical determination. I'd learned during my electrical career that backup systems save your life when main power fails. This documentation fortress would be my insurance policy against whatever Brenda planned next. My alliance expanded like a well-designed circuit network. Tom introduced me to Frank Morrison, retired city councilman with silver hair and eyes that had seen every municipal scam twice. Over coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Reagan administration, Frank delivered the verdict I needed. "Financial concealment isn't just unethical, it's criminal fraud," he said, stirring sugar with the methodical precision of someone who'd testified in dozens of corruption cases. "Homeowners have absolute right to know when their association faces bankruptcy." Channel 7's Sarah Kim was even hungrier for the story. "Municipal corruption is my specialty," she said, practically vibrating with journalistic excitement as she reviewed my files. "Fake authorities, financial fraud, elder abuse. This has everything except actual bodies buried in backyards." But Beverly Santos delivered the most beautiful discovery. Public records showing Brenda's personal finances were imploding faster than a controlled demolition. The HOA president terrorizing everyone else was 2 months behind on her own $480,000 mortgage. The irony was so perfect I nearly laughed out loud. She was trying to save the HOA to save herself, forcing new revenue through harassment while her own financial house burned down around her ears. During late-night research sessions, I discovered the state attorney general maintained a dedicated HOA fraud hotline. Apparently, corrupt boards were common enough to warrant specialized investigation teams with their own prosecutors. I crafted a complaint letter with the precision of technical specifications, attaching every piece of evidence like supporting documentation for a complex electrical job. Financial concealment, fraudulent impersonation, systematic harassment. The Attorney General's office would have enough material to stay busy until Christmas. But legal vindication wasn't enough. 67 families had been deceived about their financial exposure, trusting that HOA dues were managed responsibly while their association hemorrhaged money into Brenda's failed legal adventures. Marcus suggested the nuclear option, demanding a special homeowners meeting to discuss urgent financial disclosure. State law required such meetings when 20% of residents requested them. Getting those signatures required diplomatic precision. Most residents still trusted Brenda, unaware their association was bankrupt. I needed to educate without seeming like a vindictive troublemaker with personal axes to grind. Margaret Mila became my secret weapon. As Mrs. Mila's daughter, she had credibility with longtime residents who remembered her mother's harassment ordeal. Margaret agreed to help gather signatures by sharing documentation of Brenda's systematic intimidation tactics. The timing had to be perfect, like synchronizing multiple electrical systems to prevent power surges. The annual HOA meeting was 3 weeks away, ideal for dramatic financial revelation. Sarah Kim would attend as routine community correspondent while Marcus represented my legal interests. Everything needed coordination. Attorney General complaint, special meeting demand, media exposure, and protective legal measures for when Brenda realized I wasn't just defending myself, I was dismantling her entire operation. My evenings were spent creating information packets for every homeowner, clear financial crisis explanations, harassment documentation, and independent legal resource contacts. The packets were designed to inform without inflaming, educate without accusation. But while I prepared for war, Brenda was planning her own escalation. Tom reported increased surveillance, more photography sessions, and urgent whispered conferences among board members. The smell of impending conflict hung in the air like ozone before thunderstorms. Soon, Brenda would realize I wasn't just some contractor she could intimidate into submission. I was coming for her secrets, her authority, and her corrupt kingdom. My only question was, how far would she go to protect everything she'd built on lies? Based on her escalating desperation, I suspected I was about to find out. 3 days after I'd quietly started gathering signatures for the special meeting, Brenda discovered my plan and launched what I can only describe as total suburban warfare. It started with my phone buzzing at 7 a.m. while I was drinking coffee that tasted like liquid motivation. Jim Patterson, one of my best commercial clients, sounded like he was calling to cancel Christmas. "Dalton, got a strange call yesterday. Some woman claimed you're facing serious legal troubles and might not finish our electrical project." Jim's voice carried the uncomfortable tone of someone delivering bad news. "She suggested we verify your credentials before the contract renewal." My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. What exactly did she say? Property disputes, unprofessional conduct, possible license suspension. She made it sound like you're one lawsuit away from bankruptcy. Jim paused. "I know you're solid, but thought you should know someone's targeting your reputation." By afternoon, the assault was systematic. Linda Morrison from the hardware store mentioned a concerned neighbor, warning about my questionable electrical work. My insurance agent called about mysterious complaints claiming my business practices were under state investigation. Brenda was carpet bombing my livelihood with precision strikes, but her digital warfare showed real sophistication. Tom forwarded me screenshots from next door that read like a paranoid thriller written by suburban housewives. Multiple new accounts were spreading rumors about the dangerous new resident on Meadowlark Road. Dalton Watch 2024 claimed I'd physically threatened Brenda during a violent property confrontation. The post included dramatic language about feeling unsafe in our own neighborhood and needing community protection from unstable individuals. Concerned Neighbor 47 suggested my electrical work violated multiple building codes and posed serious fire hazards to neighboring families. This post cleverly included technical-sounding language that would frighten anyone who'd ever worried about house fires. Willowbrook Mom went full conspiracy theory, implying I hosted late-night gatherings with suspicious visitors who might be involved in drug distribution. The post was crafted with the perfect blend of concern and innuendo that makes suburban parents lock their doors. I spent that evening playing digital detective, tracing IP addresses like I was hunting electrical faults. Every fake account originated from devices registered at Brenda's address or her board members' homes. The woman had turned her entire HOA leadership into a coordinated character assassination squad. Wednesday morning brought the nuclear escalation. My phone rang while I was installing new circuits in a downtown restaurant. The caller ID made my hands freeze. State Electrical Licensing Board. Never a call you want during busy work hours. "Mr. Martinez, we've received a comprehensive complaint regarding your business practices," said a voice that sounded like it processed complaints between coffee breaks. "Allegations include unlicensed work, multiple safety violations, and fraudulent billing practices." The familiar smell of electrical work, hot metal, and wire insulation suddenly felt nauseating. A licensing investigation could destroy 20 years of reputation building, even if every allegation was pure fiction. Who filed this complaint? Brenda Kowalski, representing multiple concerned residents. She submitted extensive documentation of alleged violations. I scheduled an emergency appointment to review her evidence. Whatever Brenda had fabricated, it was comprehensive enough to trigger official state investigation. That evening brought more devastating news. My insurance agent called with updates that made my stomach drop like a failed elevator. Someone had reported multiple safety incidents at recent job sites, triggering a complete review of my liability coverage. Even if these reports are false, my agent explained, the investigation process could increase your premiums by 40% or result in coverage cancellation. The acrid taste of panic filled my mouth as I drove home through traffic that seemed to move with the sluggish pace of bureaucratic investigations. Brenda wasn't just harassing me, she was systematically dismantling my ability to support myself. But Thursday morning brought an angel disguised as Mrs. Mila's daughter. Margaret called from Portland with news that would change everything. "I've been going through Mom's papers more systematically. Found something explosive." She emailed photographs of a detailed diary Mrs. Mila had maintained during her harassment ordeal. But the real treasure was something that made my electrician's heart sing: audio recordings. Mom was old-school paranoid, Margaret explained. Kept a micro-cassette recorder in her purse after Brenda's visits started getting aggressive. Said if someone was going to lie about conversations, she wanted proof of what really happened. The recordings were prosecution-quality evidence. Brenda openly admitting to filing false government reports, bragging about creative compliance strategies and discussing plans to expand revenue through strategic property acquisition. The smoking gun was a conversation from 6 months before Mrs. Mila's death, Brenda explaining to another board member that financial crisis requires aggressive expansion tactics and resistant property owners need to understand serious consequences. Marcus nearly spit out his coffee when he heard them. "She's confessing to felonies on tape," he said, his lawyer instincts practically vibrating with excitement. Armed with Mrs. Mila's evidence, I realized Brenda's desperation had driven her into criminal territory. Every false report was building my prosecution case, but I also knew she wasn't finished escalating. Someone willing to destroy an elderly woman's final years wouldn't stop at business sabotage. By Friday morning, I thought Brenda had exhausted her arsenal of harassment tactics. I was wrong. Desperate people don't just escalate, they go completely insane. The first sign came when Tom called at 6 a.m., his voice tight with disbelief. "Dude, there's a white van from the EPA parked outside your house. Guys in hazmat suits are walking around your property with clipboards." I threw on clothes and rushed outside to find 2 environmental inspectors methodically photographing my garden while taking soil samples. The morning air carried the chemical smell of their testing equipment mixed with the scent of my tomato plants, and surreal combination of bureaucracy and suburbia. "What's the emergency?" I asked the lead inspector, a tired-looking guy who clearly had better things to do. "Report of potential groundwater contamination from residential chemical disposal," he said, consulting paperwork that looked official enough to be legitimate. "Someone filed a complaint claiming hazardous materials are being improperly stored on this property." I watched them spend 3 hours testing soil that had never seen anything more dangerous than organic fertilizer. Their equipment beeped and clicked with mechanical precision while I explained that my chemical storage consisted of lawnmower gas and WD-40 in a locked shed. Their conclusion was inevitable. No contamination, no violations, no hazardous materials detected. Just another false report wasting taxpayer resources. "Who filed the complaint?" The inspector showed me the paperwork. Brenda Kowalski claiming suspicious chemical odors and potential environmental hazards threatening neighborhood water supplies. But Brenda's federal agency tour was just beginning. Tuesday brought the IRS. An auditor named William sat in my kitchen spreading 20 years of tax returns across my table like he was solving a murder case. The smell of his government-issued coffee mixed with the stress sweat I was trying not to produce. "We received a tip claiming unreported business income and potential tax evasion," Williams explained with the enthusiasm of someone reading refrigerator warranties. The complaint included detailed allegations about cash payments and off-the-books electrical work. I provided every receipt, every bank statement, every piece of documentation proving my taxes were cleaner than hospital surgery. Williams spent 6 hours auditing my life before reaching the obvious conclusion. My financial records were impeccable. "Whoever filed this complaint either has serious misconceptions about your business or was deliberately wasting our time," Williams said, packing up his files with obvious irritation. The following week brought immigration enforcement, despite the fact that I was born in Cleveland and my family had been American citizens since before the Civil War. The ICE officer looked embarrassed when I showed him my birth certificate and military discharge papers. "Someone reported suspicious activity and questioned your legal status," he explained apologetically. "Obviously a false report. Sorry for the inconvenience." By Thursday, I was expecting visits from the FBI, NASA, and possibly the Vatican. Brenda had apparently decided that if she couldn't destroy me locally, she'd involve every federal agency that would answer her calls. But Friday morning brought the confrontation that would finally expose her complete mental breakdown. I was loading tools into my truck at 6 a.m. when Brenda's white Lexus screeched into my driveway, blocking my exit. She jumped out like a woman possessed, her perfectly styled hair disheveled and her business clothes wrinkled like she'd slept in them. The stench of desperation hung around her like cheap perfume as she marched toward me with the determination of someone who'd completely lost touch with reality. "This ends now," she screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You will submit to HOA authority or we'll seize your property by force if we have to." The words echoed across the quiet neighborhood like a deranged battle cry. Windows started opening as neighbors emerged to witness what sounded like a complete psychological meltdown happening in broad daylight. "Brenda, you need to move your car," I said calmly, pulling out my phone to record her breakdown. "I have work appointments this morning. No more games, no more delays. You will comply with community standards or face the consequences." She was gesticulating wildly, spittle flying as she ranted about property seizure authority that existed only in her increasingly unhinged imagination. Mrs. Henderson from across the street called 911 when Brenda started threatening physical force. The sound of sirens approaching seemed to snap her back to partial reality, but the damage was done. Officer Rodriguez arrived to find Brenda still screaming about her non-existent authority to seize private property. The contrast was stark. A calm professional dealing with someone who'd clearly crossed the line from harassment into mental health crisis territory. "Ma'am, you have no legal authority over this property," Rodriguez explained with the patience of someone who'd dealt with delusional complaints before. "You need to move your vehicle immediately." "But the community standards, the property values, he's destroying everything." Brenda's voice carried the desperate edge of someone watching their entire world collapse. Rodriguez documented her threats while explaining that false government reports constitute criminal activity. As he spoke, I realized Brenda had finally provided the perfect evidence of her harassment campaign, a public meltdown witnessed by multiple neighbors and recorded by police. The woman who'd spent 18 months trying to destroy my peace had just destroyed herself instead. Her desperate gambit had become her final mistake. 5 days after Brenda's public meltdown, the Willowbrook Estates annual meeting arrived like Judgment Day wrapped in suburban formality. The community center, ironically the same building being secretly foreclosed, buzzed with unprecedented attendance. 63 homeowners packed folding chairs that creaked under the weight of 18 months of suppressed frustrations. Channel 7's news crew positioned cameras near the back, ostensibly covering routine community governance. Marcus Webb sat with legal documents in his briefcase, while Officer Rodriguez attended as community liaison. The air smelled like nervous anticipation mixed with the industrial carpet cleaner they'd used to make everything look presentable for the cameras. Brenda entered like a general preparing for her final battle. Her appearance was immaculate, fresh blonde highlights, pressed business suit, confident smile that didn't quite hide the desperation in her eyes. She carried herself with the forced authority of someone who knew her kingdom was crumbling but refused to admit defeat. "Welcome to our annual financial and governance review," she announced, her voice echoing off walls that would soon be seized by creditors. "Tonight we'll discuss community improvements, budget allocations, and addressing external threats to our property values." Margaret Mila raised her hand immediately. "Before discussing budgets, we need full financial disclosure. Many residents have questions about our actual financial position." Nervous murmurs rippled through the crowd. Most homeowners had no idea their association was bankrupt, believing their monthly dues funded legitimate community improvements rather than legal debt payments. Brenda's smile flickered like a fluorescent bulb preparing to burn out. "Financial matters will be addressed in the appropriate agenda sequence." "Actually," I said, standing up with my box of documentation, "I have information every homeowner deserves to know about your current financial situation." The room went silent except for the quiet whir of news cameras capturing every moment. I'd timed this perfectly. Maximum attendance, media present, legal representation available. Over the past 6 months, I've discovered that this HOA is hiding $847,000 in debt from a failed lawsuit against the city, I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the packed room. "Your monthly dues aren't funding community improvements. They're paying legal fees for Brenda's personal vendetta that bankrupted your association." Gasps and angry murmurs filled the air as I distributed copies of court documents, bank foreclosure notices, and financial records to stunned homeowners. The sound of papers rustling mixed with shocked whispers created a symphony of suburban outrage. "Those documents are fabricated lies," Brenda shrieked, her composure evaporating like morning dew. "This man has been harassing our community for months, filing false reports and threatening residents." Sarah Kim from Channel 7 stepped forward with her microphone. "Mrs. Kowalski, these appear to be official court documents. Can you confirm whether the HOA currently owes $847,000 in legal fees?" "I don't have to answer hostile questions from biased media," Brenda snapped, her mask of authority completely dissolving. But I wasn't finished. "Let me show everyone the real harassment campaign," I said, connecting my laptop to the room's projector. 18 months of fake government citations, fraudulent surveys, false emergency reports, and systematic business sabotage. The projector screen lit up with security footage of Rick's fake survey, screenshots of forged violation notices, and recordings of Brenda threatening Mrs. Mila. The visual evidence was overwhelming, a comprehensive documentation of corruption that left no room for denial. The homeowners' shock transformed into outrage as they realized the scope of deception. These weren't just financial irregularities. This was systematic fraud affecting every family in the community. "This is a conspiracy," Brenda screamed, pointing at me with shaking hands. "He orchestrated this entire financial crisis to destroy our community. Property values are plummeting because of his resistance to reasonable standards." Officer Rodriguez stepped forward with the calm authority of someone trained to handle public disturbances. "Ma'am, we have documented reports of your threats and false government filings. You need to control yourself." But Brenda was beyond rational control. "We have the authority to seize non-compliant properties. Community standards must be enforced by force if necessary." Her voice cracked as she repeated the same delusional threats that had gotten her a restraining order. The news cameras captured every unhinged moment while homeowners stared in horrified fascination at their association president's complete mental breakdown. Marcus Webb stood up with legal documents in hand. "Mrs. Kowalski, you have no legal authority over any property outside this HOA's jurisdiction. Your threats constitute criminal harassment and will be prosecuted accordingly." The room erupted in calls for her resignation. Board members who'd supported her quietly distanced themselves, realizing their association with her corruption could result in personal liability. Tom Hendricks made the motion everyone was thinking. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current board and emergency financial audit of all association accounts." The vote was unanimous, except for Brenda's single dissent. Standing before the assembled community, with cameras rolling and legal consequences looming, I delivered the words that would end her reign of suburban tyranny. I just wanted to live peacefully on my own property. Instead, I discovered systematic corruption threatening 67 families' financial security. This was never about me. It was about protecting this community from fraud and restoring honest governance. The applause that followed sounded like justice finally arriving in Willowbrook Estates. 6 weeks after the meeting that ended Brenda's suburban dictatorship, justice arrived with the satisfying precision of a perfectly installed electrical panel. The criminal charges came swiftly. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh filed 6 felony counts: fraud, false government reports, criminal harassment, and elder abuse. The evidence mountain was so overwhelming that Brenda's attorney recommended immediate plea negotiations rather than facing a jury who'd watched her meltdown on Channel 7. Brenda accepted 18 months supervised probation, $50,000 restitution, and permanent prohibition from any HOA leadership role statewide. Her real estate license vanished permanently, and she was forced to sell her foreclosure-threatened home to cover legal fees. The sweet smell of financial recovery exceeded everyone's expectations. Independent auditors recovered $340,000 through insurance claims and asset seizures, dramatically reducing community debt. What should have been bankruptcy became manageable refinancing spread over 10 years. The HOA transformation was beautiful to witness. Tom Hendricks won the presidential election on a transparency platform that would have made government reformers weep with joy. Monthly financial statements became standard practice, and major expenditures now require actual homeowner approval through legitimate voting. Most importantly, the community center, that symbol of Brenda's fiscal irresponsibility, was saved through proper refinancing. Instead of foreclosure, Willowbrook Estates emerged stronger with educated homeowners and honest leadership. My personal vindication tasted sweeter than morning coffee on a perfect day. All false government reports were expunged from official records. The state licensing board issued a formal letter confirming my credentials were never questioned. Business actually increased as media coverage attracted clients who valued integrity and thorough documentation. The restraining order became permanent after Brenda violated it twice, driving past my property and leaving rambling notes about community justice and property rights revenge. She eventually fled to another state where HOA networks had been warned about her history through professional channels. But the real victory was community healing that transformed neighborly relationships. Residents who'd been intimidated into silence found their voices again. Beverly Santos became official municipal liaison, ensuring proper oversight of future projects. Margaret Mila moved back from Portland permanently, saying the community finally felt safe. The scholarship program became our proudest achievement. Using recovered fraud funds, we established annual scholarships for students pursuing municipal law, accounting, or public administration careers. The first recipients were high school seniors whose essays about preventing government corruption brought tears to selection committee eyes. Sarah Kim's investigative series won regional journalism awards and prompted state legislation requiring annual financial audits for all homeowner associations. Our case became the template for identifying and prosecuting similar corruption throughout the region. My conservation project exceeded original expectations. The donated easement created protected wildlife habitat while providing outdoor education space for local elementary schools. The irony still makes me smile. Land Brenda tried to steal through harassment became permanent community benefit. Every spring, we celebrate Transparency Day, part festival, part civic education event. Local officials provide workshops on municipal law, financial literacy, and recognizing corruption. Other communities now copy our model for preventing similar problems. Standing on my front porch this evening, the golden hour light filtering through oak trees I'd almost lost to fraudulent surveys, I reflected on an unexpected journey. I'd sought simple peace and quiet, but discovered that protecting yourself sometimes requires protecting entire communities. The experience taught invaluable lessons. Individual harassment often masks systemic corruption affecting many people. Documentation defeats intimidation every time. Allies multiply strength exponentially. And sunlight truly remains the best disinfectant for institutional rot. The conservation area fills with evening bird songs, a natural symphony that drowns out memories of diesel trucks and false emergency sirens. The air smells like honeysuckle and freedom, exactly what I'd wanted when this nightmare began. For anyone facing similar harassment, document everything meticulously, research thoroughly, build alliances carefully, and never underestimate ordinary citizens working together against corruption. Knowledge is power, and corrupt officials hate informed residents more than anything. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA nightmare. You're definitely not alone in these battles. Share this story with anyone dealing with property harassment because awareness prevents future victims. Hit subscribe to HOA Stories if you want more tales where David actually defeats Goliath and justice prevails over suburban tyranny. Because sometimes the good guys really do win when they fight smart instead of just fighting hard. Tonight's coffee tastes like victory, freedom, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done.
That's a wrap for today's episode on HOA Stories. If you enjoyed watching Karma in action, smash that like button, comment your thoughts, and let us know if you've dealt with HOA madness too. Subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA meltdown we post.